The United States top envoy to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has dismissed fears of a mini-NATO in Asia, an accusation China has lobbed at the grouping's stepped-up efforts in the region. Even so, Ambassador Julianne Smith tells CNA she believes NATO allies need to guard against what she calls China's tactics in the Euro-Atlantic. She spoke to East Asia Tonight's Tan Shui, who began by asking what's behind the US and NATO's courtship of their like-minded friends in Asia.
I don't think anyone has to be nervous about NATO expanding into the Indo-Pacific. We're not talking about membership. We're talking about partnerships where we all find tremendous value in working together on a variety of shared security challenges.
You're talking about NATO's individually tailored partnership programs, right, with Japan, Korea, Australia, maybe New Zealand. But, you know, how is that different from a mini NATO in the Asia-Pacific?
Well, it's very different because if NATO were looking to expand into the Indo-Pacific, the alliance would be looking to extend an Article 5 commitment to every single country that we have a partnership, but neither the countries themselves, neither Japan, Korea, Australia, or New Zealand, nor the NATO members themselves are talking about membership. We're talking about partnership, which is different than a full-fledged security guarantee where an attack on one is an attack on all, and NATO allies would be obligated to come to the aid of the country that is facing an attack. So that is not where this is going, and I need to clarify that, certainly with your viewers, so that everyone understands that these are just partnerships where we can share best practices, share insights on how to tackle these variety of challenges that we face, and learn from one another. That's what we're talking about, and that's why all of us want to continue to deepen these partnerships without moving towards full-fledged membership.
So you say that countries don't need to worry about these partnerships. But a 2022 NATO strategic concept document specifically spells out that China's ambitions and policies challenge NATO interests, threatening international law. And more recently, we heard NATO Secretary General call China, North Korea, and Iran an alliance of authoritarian powers. How do these very public demonstrations affect NATO's relationship with China and NATO members' relations with China?
Why was the PRC included in a NATO document? It was included because increasingly we find that China is acting inside the Euro-Atlantic area in a way that we believe poses a challenge for NATO member states. We have also looked very closely at the deepening and evolving relationship between China and Russia, particularly China's support for what Russia is doing in Ukraine. And we all look at that with great concern. And for that reason, we believe that the NATO allies have to be aware of what China is doing in and around the Euro-Atlantic area, and in some cases, fortify their defenses against some of the tactics that both the PRC and Russia are using.
Well, there is also fear that NATO's moves in East Asia, risks binding China, Russia, and North Korea even closer together, and that's against NATO interests. How does that feature in the grouping's assessments and calculations?
Increasingly, we are finding that the PRC and the DPRK are working closely with Russia to support their war of aggression inside Ukraine. China likes to portray itself as neutral, but in fact, China has picked sides. China is providing an array of dual-use components to Russia that is allowing them to execute this war in Ukraine. Similarly, the DPRK is also providing support to Russia. We have been very clear in publicly calling out the support that the DPRK is providing, the ammunition that they are providing to the Russians that they are using on the battlefield. So there is a relationship here between Russia, China, and the DPRK that is having an enormous influence on Russia's ability to conduct this war, and that is of great concern to NATO allies. But we do not believe in strength strengthening our relationships with the Indo-Pacific, that is at risk of inflaming tensions. Instead, it is collectively making us stronger, the countries in the Indo-Pacific, countries in North America and Europe, to come together to address what those three countries are doing, particularly as it relates to Russia's war in Ukraine.
Ambassador, there are reports of a U.S., Japan, South Korea summit on the sidelines of the NATO summit in July in Washington. Could you confirm this? And if that is confirmed, what's on the agenda?
I have nothing to confirm in terms of a special trilateral on the margins at this point. Planning still is underway for the summit. What we do know is that we will be welcoming the leaders of our 4 Indo-Pacific partners. So we hope to see the leaders of Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand all join us at the summit.